Well, I have on the line Nicole Lebrasseur, political activist and independent thinker, and someone who wants to completely overhaul our governance, our electoral system, and our thinking of democracy. Top of the afternoon to you, Nicole Lebrasseur.
Hi, Bob and everybody. Now, that was a long list.
True, but you're doing a lot, I have to say. Every time I talk to you, you touch on another subject that's completely and directly related to democracy.
Well, I don't know what the hell you were reading, but you sent me through the roof.
Good.
In regards to the NDP and Unifor.
Yes.
And you know, I'm so fed up of these blatant lies that these politicians and the unions are spewing, and the people who believe the bullshit of what is, I'm sorry, I'm just upset. It's all bait and switch tactics over and over and over again. The same thing with Trudeau, the same thing with, this DNA testing. Mm-hmm. Everything is always embellished. When I was listening to you about the NDP, the only thing that could jump into my head was, oh, the NDP is so great, huh? Yeah, what about Alberta?
Well,
what's the NDP doing in Alberta? Nothing good. So...
I think they've got wage increases on the table there, too. We're only talking about wages for working people. We weren't talking about the overall protections of working people. That's the big one, right? Wages, this is what we've been dealing with at your end, that wages are irrelevant if the employer's sufficiently abusive to make the job untenable for the worker.
Exactly. And not only that, I mean, the history shows what you were reading before about the gaps in income and everything. Yeah. Who gives a shit, I'm sorry, about a $15 wage increase when they're going to triple everything?
Well, I hear you. But, when you're scraping the barrel and you can't even pay for food on the table or some clothes on your kids, it's good to hear that and have some optimistic view. I can't just keep kicking shit down the sidewalk, if you know what I mean.
I know.
I think some people...
It sounds encouraging. It sounds encouraging, but where the governments fail is putting a cap on inflation for the basics of everything. Absolutely. What people need to survive. I mean, don't talk to me about a $15 increase when a bread is going to cost you $10.
Yes, I know that. And it's going to continue to go up, especially when carbon taxes are laid on everything. We'll see just how much carbon is in the food we eat, the clothes we buy. It isn't just fuel for our vehicles, it's everywhere. 90% of the protein in a grain of wheat is attributed now to carbon through pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, and fuel for transport vehicles, etc. So it's going to be a big change, and it's going to be something we're going to have to nail back if it becomes too destructive. And what happens, by the way, if somewhere along the line we start to see a shift in climate that isn't rising as quickly? Are we going to be reactive enough to shut that carbon tax down? And lastly on this, which I said right out of the gate when I first heard about it, that essentially the large petroleum producers will try to get that carbon tax, and they did. Just like 2.5 months ago, Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers approached the government and said, you know what? That tax should be revenue neutral for the petroleum industry. So that tax money, carbon tax money, should go to the petroleum producers. Right.
Yeah.
And, we see the governments at all levels catering to these big corporate projects, regardless of their environmental destruction or their violation of First Nations rights or charter rights. So... Yeah,
exactly. You have to wonder, in 2008, when the SPP came through, right? For the Security Prosperity Partnership Agreements. I did a whole subject on, I started researching on the carbon monoxide that they were spraying hamburger meat with. And wow, it stays pink for 3 weeks.
Right, remember that.
And this was coming in from the United States. I'm glad I'm Canadian, but right now I'm ashamed to be Canadian because we are being turned into Americans. We're being Americanized in every which way, shape, or form. How come Americans are allowing growth hormones into their milk processes, carbon monoxide into their meats, all of these things which was dear to Canada and we disallowed. And this is where, this opened my eyes.
Well,
the whole thing. And this, I've been an activist ever since. I mean, you know.
Well,
and
we accepted the not having bovine growth hormone in Canadian milk or fed to Canadian cows. However, they fired the doctor, Shiv Chopra, who wouldn't accept it, right? And there was a big court case. I think 3 people were involved. 2 got their jobs back, but Shiv did not.
No, and he's still fighting this. Like, I mean, when are Canadians going to wake up and smell the coffee here that we need to change our entire system? I mean, when you were talking about the NDP and then, you know, Unifor, how great it is. Well, you want me to read you a little thing about Unifor?
Go ahead.
Okay, with contract battle looming, Canadian auto workers at GM CAMI plant speak out. Discontent among rank and file auto workers is growing as the massive General Motors assembly plant in Ingersoll, Ontario, in the wake of GM's announcement last month that 625 of the factory's roughly 2,600 hourly workers will lose their jobs in July. Okay, and this was posted March 23rd, 2017. The job cuts were a shot across the bow for workers who face a contract struggle in the summer and who are determined to recoup lost wages and other concessions accepted by the auto union, Unifor. The factory, 156 kilometers southwest of Toronto, opened in 1989 as a joint venture between GM and Japan-based Suzuki Motor Corporation and was originally operated under the name Canadian Automotive Manufacturing, CAMI. GM took full control of the plant in 2009 when Suzuki withdrew and expanded the plant in 2016 after it received $500 million in government tax breaks and other incentives. Okay. You want me to repeat that?
No, you don't have to. I got it. Well, we had this discussion with Bombardier, big time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same sort of stuff, 1.2 or 3 billion to Bombardier. Then the CEOs gave themselves raises. And they've shut down a lot of jobs. And when they talk jobs, and there's 2,600 or whatnot at Bombardier, there's lots. Don't quote me on that number. They're global. They're talking global. So we have to have our governments, if they're going to choose to select among various parts of our economy to support them, then they must be responsible for our money. They must get at least some shares in that company, and preferably, when you're talking big bucks like at Bombardier, they should have had somebody put on that board of directors. So in a case of a union, since our focus in our conversations is always about democracy and trying to make it a more direct form, what do you suggest Unifor should consider to improve, to highlight, to facilitate democracy within the union?
Okay, well, what we're seeing with our own personal experience here with my ex-husband, Unifor, the way Unifor operates is that if you have a grievance, only Unifor can bring it in. And then the employee who has the grievance can only speak when spoken to, basically, and the lawyers work for Unifor, not for the employee.
Totally.
So basically, what happens is the president will say, well, I'm the boss here, not you. You know, that we're going to represent you and we're going to determine what happens. And then what's been seen to happen in a few instances was that the union goes ahead, meets with the employers, and then makes a decision without even considering what the employee is going to accept or not. They actually go ahead and accept whatever the hell they want and then come back to the employee and says, well, this is what we got you.
Okay.
Take it or leave it.
Okay, well, here's my response. You heard some of it last week or whenever it was I spoke about Nanaimo Regional General Hospital and the WCB and all the bullshit that went on there. And that is this, and it's the same in British Columbia as you just described in Ontario, and I bet it's the same for labor law across the province. And that is, labor law is bullshit, frankly. There is no such thing. It's an oxymoron. If you are in a union and you have a grievance, as soon as you sign that grievance, it's the possession of the union. You could quite well, as what happened in my case, become a bargaining chip for the union's negotiations with management. You do not have what I would call working rights. If you don't have working rights in this country, you'll starve, frankly. So unions have to not absorb that contract or that, it's a contract really to represent a person with a grievance. That grievance should stay in the hands of the individual. And there should be a point in a negotiation where even if you are in a union, if you choose to hire a private labor lawyer, you should be able to do that. When I tried to do that in British Columbia here, because the Hospital Employees Union had been bought off so dramatically by the Department of Labor in BC, when I tried to hire a private lawyer and talked to several, they just threw their hands in the air and said, this is the problem. Once you're in a union, you can't deal directly with law. You have to go through what the union wants to go through. The union owns the grievance. And I said, that puts me in a really problematic position because I am an employee of a healthcare area. Doctors have privileges to work there. You have a really bad situation where everyone I deal with is in a conflict of interest with my employer. So, this is a problem nationally, how we interpret labor rights and the rights of working people, and we have to nail it back. We have to clean it up. We can't go into any kind of...
Sorry.
It's all right. We have to go into any... shouldn't go into any types of agreements with any labor, trade, or international relations without getting this cleaned up first, or whole sectors are going to be sacrificed, and the government will say, oh, well, like with the dairy farmers, if we broke up the special conditions we have here with supply management, that we would pay the dairy farmers Canadian tax dollars what they lost because of trade. Like, how often can you do that before you just gobble up all the tax dollars, which are pretty much insufficient as it is? So this is a crisis right now. That's probably why Trump won the election, frankly, because they were not, in the previous governments, taking care of people who lost their jobs through trade agreements. And that was the area that Trump and his people, Clinton and her people expected to win in those states, and they lost. And that was one of the main reasons they lost. So,
yeah, but again, you know how skeptical I am about elections, right?
Oh, totally. Well, they don't matter to you at all. They're just useless. And I'm pretty much on that doorstep. The point being, though, that I live, and you do too, just to remind you, in the system of Western deliberative assembly, which means that silence is consent, and I'll be damned. I'll be damned if I will consent to another term of what we've seen with the Liberals. That won't happen.
Yeah, and when you're looking at the labor unions getting all political, you need to worry. First of all, it's the employees that allow the unions to survive. And they've pretty much taken a position of the same thing as the government. So when you agree to a union, basically what you're doing is you're giving away all of your rights to this union. I see no difference between the Liberals and Unifor, or the Conservatives, or any other government that we've had before that. So when you're looking, when you really ask people who have Unifor as a union, okay, what they're saying, and if you read what's been being said, here's an example with WS.org. Okay, one of their, this is where I'm reading from, and it says, that this worker, Sue, says, the union works against us. They try to convince us that we should feel lucky just to have a job and that we're greedy if we want better wages and working conditions. The only input they want from us is to keep the assembly lines rolling. But if you have a complaint, nobody bothers filing a grievance anymore. If you ask the committeemen, just shrug and say they don't know about your grievance. Both the company and the union are happier putting everything through this problem solver program. If you have a complaint about safety or speed up or bad equipment, they don't want any paper trail. Just talk to your team leader verbally, they say. Your committee person doesn't want to get involved. So you end up either shutting up or fighting with your boss as a lone individual, which you are not supposed to do. When it's all over, nothing changes. And this is what Dennis has been experiencing, in the sense that now, the union wants to take over the control of what's happened to him, but he's always had to fight for himself because the union reps, even before Unifor, weren't even doing their jobs for him.
Sure enough.
And so what are we doing here? Here they're saying there's 130,000 auto workers pissed off at Unifor. So when Unifor is being thrown accolades, I just want to go through the roof because it's not what reality says.
All right. Firstly, to clear up the accolade statement, I read a news item. I think that was all I
know.
Okay.
I know.
It's hazardous to do that.
You know?
Okay, but now the thing, yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. I know that condition where they expect you to just verbalize everything. I didn't. I would walk in with a paper clipboard or whatnot, clipboard, and take notes. And every morning when I spoke with my director, and he would give me, if he had, in the early stages, he thought he could give me instructions, but he didn't know what the heck he was doing. Created so many problems, he just had to back off. And so I would just note down, oh, so you want me to blah, blah, blah. Okay, my response is if I do that, this is what will come about. Just to let you know, that's my responsibility to let you know. And I'd say, okay, next item. After a while, before the meeting was out, he'd say, why are you writing everything down? And I'd say, well, because I'm so busy, I just want to make sure I got it right.
Good thing you did. Because, when I was talking to the vice president on the phone of the union where Dennis works, I couldn't believe my ears, okay? Because I'm telling him, like, you guys are in conflict of interest. He says, no, he says, and, Dennis can't say anything. He says, I can process the grievance and, sign for him as myself for Dennis Lamotte. I said, no, you do nothing like that. You do not sign his as for him under any circumstances, until he is ready to discuss this with you. Right now, he's not able to because he's under a stress leave. And talking with you aggravates his stress. So we're not getting anywhere.
Well, that's
and I said, yeah, and then I asked him, I said, okay, well, I'm going to have to send you some information. I said, he says, well, you'll need a doctor's letter to say that we're not allowed to talk to him. I said, well, I'm going to get you that. On May 4th, I'll get you all of this. And I said, and we signed a power of attorney that I'm allowed to even go to court for him. So we're going to be sending that. So I asked him, I said, which email? I said, what's your email? He says to me, union233@tembec.ca. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, WTF? What? I said, are you shitting me?
What's appropriate?
What the hell are you doing with the tembec.ca email?
Oh.
He says, well, that's because we work there. I said, conflict of interest. I said, why the hell would a union, Unifor, allow used to have your email through Tembec?
Oh.
He says, it's all safe. I said, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
I said, no. I said, I take care of websites. I can access everybody's passwords, okay? I don't give a rat's ass what Tembec tells you that, your information from the employees is secure. I said, that's bullshit.
Total.
I said, how are you going to be negotiating and having people's emails and having conversation with them in relevance to their cases, and you're telling me you have a tembec.ca email? I said, are you crazy?
That's wild. You don't want that. That's nonsense for that. They just do not understand, or they don't care. That's the problem. And it's not only doing things right, it's being seen to do things right. So people feel there's justice and they have freedom of speech, at least with their union. But to have that handle going through that server belonging to the employer, that is willful ignorance, and that should... It
is. And I would be interested in finding out how many other, the employees who work for, who have Unifor as their, or, union, or any other unions for that matter, if their employee unions are connected to their employer's servers.
Yikes. Yeah, that's... Okay, well, let's move.
I went through the roof, but...
You should. Now, I'm sure I had something to say, but it's hard to keep up with you some days. So let's go on to the DNA aspect of the proposed cannabis legislation and how they just can't seem to keep their hands off of screwing up the charter if they can. So, well,
exactly. And, this came out, you made relevance to that last night when we spoke about, speaking on the show today. And one of the things that I noticed was a lot of these articles came out March 8, 2017. And it's about the Liberal backbenchers vote against Trudeau, pass law banning genetic discrimination.
Yes.
And when you look at the grand scheme of things, okay, they need to be able to speak openly about DNA collection. Now, through what I found was that they started talking about this on the government website in 2002, on how the cops were going to be able to originate, or the government of Canada, a DNA data bank for arrest.
Wait a minute. Did you say Government of Canada or RCMP?
Well, actually, it was the Government of Canada because they had to pass a bill for it.
Oh, I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
So when you're looking at this on the government website, it's only open for discussion. So what they had to do is the Government of Canada had to go back and ask the courts, we got to make sure that this, doesn't hurt the human rights aspect and blah, blah, blah. So now with the whole cannabis issue and the DNA and all this, it's almost like they're trying to hide the fact. They're making a big stink about, oh, my God, people are going to have to be protected against, privatization and, the rights of these private corporations having DNA, or let's say insurance companies demanding your DNA for you to have a DNA screening. So when you look at the grand scheme of things, it's like they're trying to all of a sudden put on this big show about, they need to protect the people. But at the same time, it alleviates the fact, it kind of makes us accept that, the courts and the cops can, though.
I understand that. Some people in the House of Commons, even in the Liberal Party, understood that. And they did not support Bill S-201, which is the bill we're talking about collecting DNA and the limitations on it. That's the March 8th, 2017 article that Nicole's talking about.
See, okay. The one that I have here, and I think it's important, it says, in voting for what is known as Bill S-201, the backbench Liberals, along with all Conservatives, NDP, and Green Party MPs, made it a crime for, among other things, insurance companies to demand potential customers provide a DNA test in order to get a policy. Additionally, no company will be able to deny someone a job if they fail to have their genes tested.
Well,
that's
that's for companies.
Yes, and this is what I'm getting at, okay? Now, protection from discrimination because of an individual's genetic makeup will now be written into the Canadian Labour Code.
But not in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
No, in both, okay? Into the Canadian Labour Code and the Canadian Human Rights Act.
Right. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, S-201 has been proposed by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who, on Wednesday morning, called it unconstitutional on the grounds that in regulating insurance companies, the bill was wading into an area subject to provincial jurisdiction.
Right.
But
go ahead.
Why would he use that to begin with, right?
Because I'll tell you, you ask, it wasn't rhetorical, I presume. I hardly ever think any question from you is rhetorical. I suggest he did that because they were narrowly prescribing who would be subject to this law. And that is, it would only be the federal employees. So here's a quote from that article I just defined. It would have meant, that's the bill, the changes that Trudeau tried to get at the last minute with Raybould, the Justice Minister. They tried to quash it, but the backbenchers voted for the bill because it was an open vote. It wasn't whipped, and it was in defiance of Trudeau and the Justice Minister. So this is what the article says. That bill that Trudeau and the Justice Minister are promoting, the change because they thought it should be changed, it would have meant, if they got the changes, the bill would apply only to federally regulated employees who account for just 5 to 7% of the population. Oliphant argued that the bill is an appropriate federal response in an area where provinces and territories have failed to act for a dozen years. And he noted that 3 legal experts testified before the Commons Justice Committee about its constitutionality. And that's like the last sentence or 2 paragraphs. So this issue is full of worms, actually. It's a really hot issue. And again, just like we saw with the driving part connected to cannabis, this bill as well is an abuse of legislation. This bill should have gone to the lawyers for the government who vet legislation before they propose it. And,
well, we also need, if they want to pass bills, we need to have bills that will prevent insurance companies from doing exactly this. It says, insurance company representatives had testified that if S-201 passed and became law, as it will before the end of spring, premiums for some kinds of insurance, including life insurance, could skyrocket. So now the insurance companies are a little pissed off because they won't be able to get your DNA screening. Why? Because a woman was denied because she had, her genes tested and she was predisposed for this disease. They denied her claim, and then she had to take this to court. And the thing is every time that they pass such laws like this, the people, it's like, okay, let's pass the laws. Then if the people complain, they'll have to take it to court. Every time they do something that is so stupid like this, the people are having to take them to court, and they know that the most people will not take them to court because who can afford it?
Who can afford the delays as well? Like I said in one of the articles in the first hour, they see the problem. They're in a conflict of interest, being the government making legislation compels people to go to the courts, but the government has plugged the courts. The government has underfunded the courts so that there's a huge backlog. So the government is responsible for people suffering because they can't actually get legal protection when they need it. Now here's an insurance statement from the March article. And it's got an element of business truth to it, but it's fraught with peril. And that's what DNA testing is all about. It's perilous. Let's be clear. Here's the statement from the insurance industry. Quote, the insurance industry has fiercely opposed an aspect of the legislation that would make it illegal for anyone to require a person to undergo genetic testing or disclose the results of previous tests as a condition of signing or continuing an insurance policy or any other goods, service, contract, or agreement. If it passed, it would also prohibit anyone from sharing genetic testing results without written consent, although there are exceptions for physicians and researchers. A breach of the proposed law would result in a fine of up to $1 million or 5 years behind bars. Now here, that's what they said in this article. Now here in Nanaimo, the hospital has just put in a digital information system for doctors to feed their data into. It's all a data file. So you're going to tell me that is so secure that if an insurance company in the States really wanted somebody's DNA information, their profile, whatnot, they could not hack into that system, and it's all sitting right there. The whole town's DNA package, right? Like if they were definitely into some nefarious political dealings, they could contrive some sort of issue going on in the community's whole general health regime or makeup that is false.
Exactly. And when you look at insurance companies, the whole thing is about being able to have the power to deny people their claims. It's rampant in the United States. And now it's starting here from what we can see from that lady from Sudbury. Now, it goes on to say again here, and actuary working for the insurance committee testified last fall at the Commons Justice Committee that premiums for men would jump 30% and would jump 50% for women.
Wow. Yeah. Well,
so because they can't get your genetics, now you're going to have to pay more life insurance?
Yep.
Who is regulating these people here?
That's a darn...
Who are really working for?
Who's regulating is a really good question. We should pay attention because with the alleged climate change process, higher waters, longer unpredictable events in weather, insurance industry, let's face it, it's getting hammered, especially in Canada, because we've not paid attention to the fact that the entire central part of Canada is below sea level, and where other developed countries have not allowed building in areas that are so vulnerable to flooding, Canada has not. It's allowed building in all these areas, the prairies, from about eastern Manitoba through to even the west edge of Alberta. Those areas are high-risk flood zones that will not go away. People are going to have problems forever until they move. And so the insurance industry has to pick up a fair bit of that. And they don't see that being very good for them. You know, they've been close to bankruptcy before on asbestos, I think it was, Lloyd's of London. And now they're smartening up. Lloyd's came out a year ago, I believe, and said, we will not cover injuries that are related to wireless injuries or harm related to wireless exposure. So, you know, what does that mean? Well, and so when you have a school board who put wireless into the school, and there's tons of documentation about the harmful effects of wireless, particularly on children and those adults exposed to it all the day that they're working, which are teachers, right? So if the school board and all school board and reps and every politician and local, provincial should know this, that because there's so much data out there now, there are thousands of good studies on this. Europe is already acknowledging it, and they have treatment for electrohypersensitivity, it's called, EHS. Those school board directors, etc., are on the hook because they haven't done due diligence on this. They're definitely on the hook because the insurance agency isn't going to cover them. So even if the school board has insurance, you go down the line, ka-chink, 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 you almost always end up in the big insurance companies' books, right, that are the underwriters, right? And at that point, they discover, holy crap, we aren't covered for this particular injury, and we have not been for 12 months. Like, you know what? They didn't do due diligence, right? So they would be personally accountable for that. And the shoe has not dropped with these people. It's quite incredible. And we're just motoring along. And part of it is because, well, huge part of it is Health Canada and Safety Code 6, which is woefully inadequate for wireless harm protection here in Canada and the United States. We have the worst standards in the world. Even though we have some of the best science and technology on safety on this issue, we have the worst standard in the world. Places like Poland, Russia, China, they have better...
You know what we have? I'm going to be very rude here, Bob.
Well, don't get too rough here, but sure, go ahead, fire it at me.
Well, what we have in Canada is a bunch of BS, okay? Because it's all smoke and mirrors. You know, we're supposed to have this great country with all, you know, this, our politicians are promising great things and our corporations are promising great things, and it's all smoke and mirrors. Everybody, if you were to remove the veils from the political parties, from the politicians, from this governance, from the unions, from the committees who are all set up to begin with as, I call them all controlled opposition, to pretend to be helping the people, and yet they don't. And then the people don't have the money to battle things in court to defend themselves. And when lawyers are all ganged together to work only for the employers and not the employees because there's no money in it, it's all BS.
I hear you. I know. It's a fragile environment for the average working person.
Yeah, well, you know, all they're managing to do is getting me very hostile.
What's the word, though? You know, that's a motivating factor as long as you can manage your emotional balance with it. I don't mind. I won't say I like, but I don't mind being motivated to the point of, you know, tossing out some of, you know, colorful language and pounding a fist on a table. Not so much in the present.
Yeah, but see, Bob, my aspirations are to be a flower child. Not this barracuda trying to, you know, see what the smoke and mirrors are hiding, you know?
Well, isn't there a flower that eats insects?
Oh, yeah, but I really don't like those ones.
I just thought I'd throw that out there. So, let's see. So, that's looking at this crazy thing of labor and DNA. So, let's hit this thing right on the head. How do we get out of a situation where no matter what we ask for, we never get it. And when we do get something we ask for, we get something worse attached to it, like an omnibus bill that threatens our very existence, right?
Right, and the omnibus bills, like who can read all that within a week, right? And this is all set up for the governors to accept the omnibus and, you know, to pass them through without even considering or even debating. And this is the problem with our country. Why does everything have to be passed first and then debated after the fact?
It's called power. It's called power. They're ramming legislation through. They don't give a tinker's damn about process.
And these senators who are supposed to be protecting us are not doing their jobs. They need to be called out. They're the ones who stop these bills from coming in because there's not enough scrutiny.
Sorry.
You want to say that word for me?
Scrutiny.
Scrutiny. There we go. My French tongue just wants to roll all those things in there. But you know, when you're looking at that, it's infuriating. And like for me, like, you know, when I was hearing you read, I felt myself becoming like, oh, you know, want to go through the roof, because this is not what actual people are thinking. This is all smoke and mirrors and embellishing everything and not dealing with reality. And then people want to believe that this is all true and yet do not deal with reality. Now, with the cannabis issue and Trudeau, what's the underlying reason here? So, okay, we've got a DNA data bank, and yeah, we should be okay with the cops, you know, demanding our DNA, but not the private insurance and all of these companies. No, let's make a big stink about these guys infringing on our rights and forget that the government itself within the court system is infringing on our rights too.
Okay, now I was thinking of something the last 48 hours. I gotta say, we're getting close to the end of this hour. I gotta throw this on the table. Police do not require any justification under the new cannabis law to pull a driver over, really. They can invent anything they want, pretty much. Dirt on your license plate, whatever they, you know, and then they ask for a fluid sample. Well, with the smart meter technology that's also coming down the pipes on top of us in all the provinces, that wireless technology is able to snoop in our house, and they will know what we do in our houses, what we say, what we do. And so even if you are not impaired, but you just say had a puff on a joint, one puff, so there's a reasonable amount in your blood, but not enough to impair you, but enough to be detected, police will be able to, with that data, determine that, yep, you had a puff, even just by knowing where you are in the house. If they know your routine, you might have a room you go into or plug in a vaporizer or whatnot. So they know they can stop you and will find something in your blood that can give you a lot of misery, frankly, even though you've not infracted on anything. Now, just to be clear, before we go any further, the whole concept of prohibition of cannabis is not based on real crime, because no one's been harmed and no property has been damaged. It's about controlling the population. And that's,
exactly.
That's where we're going.
I agree. Because, you know, I've been in instances where, you know, I've walked through crowds and people are smoking pot. And if I'm standing there talking to somebody else, I mean, I can have that on my hair. And if they take a follicle, I didn't even ingest it. I was just standing there. I didn't even touch it. I could get thrown in jail.
Oh, but don't worry. You will be able to go to the Supreme Court eventually and have your case heard.
Again, after the fact, right?
Totally after the fact.
Where are we protected from this draconian dictatorship? 150 years of celebrating Canada. Some people should be ashamed of even posting a Canadian flag on their walls or their cars or whatever.
Well,
what's there to be proud of? Nothing.
Well, yeah, you know, it's not all politics. When I see a Canadian flag, I think of rivers and lakes and loons and, you know, buffalo and caribou. I don't get overwhelmed by Canada being a political entity so much as a territory that we can shape the way we want it to be. And we've not done that very well. And that's why I would not be proud to celebrate 150 years. 150 years of what, frankly? You know, Canadians fought in First War that was put together by the Americans and the British. Then the Second War, again put together by the Americans, the British, and the banksters around the world. And those Canadians who fought and died in both wars were not Canadian citizens. They were British subjects. And they only became true Canadian citizens in 1947, 2 years after the war. So, you know, we've been fed a line of BS from day one. And if you look at some of the article, the one that I was talking about from that one lady, I think you remember her, we both disagreed.
Yeah, that's the one where I would debate. We were not, I seriously doubt that since 1931 that we were British subject. If we were, it was only de facto because of the BNA Act not being changed. But legally, anybody would have been able to, I think, win a court case saying that we're not British subjects since 1931.
Nobody did, though.
No, and who's got the money, and who would think of that?
Well, who is thinking that is the big one? Because what I see when I look back in that point of history, people were still enamored with being British, frankly. Like, that was not a bad thing, right? And,
yeah, but don't tell that to a French Canadian.
Well, you know what? Don't tell it to me either, right? Especially now that I've uncovered what they've done in both world wars. No.
Well, that's it, and it's not about being British. It's not about being Canadian. It's about the governance of these countries and who's instigating all of the trouble. It's just like Israel. I mean, now, excuse me, Canada is no longer selling Canadian bonds, but we're selling Israel-Canada bonds?
Yeah, we talked about that. That's very problematic for me, actually. So, and if you look at why the Israelis are so thrilled that the Canadian government would sell Israeli bonds and that they would be tax-free in Canada, well, then the Canadian government stopped selling Canadian bonds. But the Israelis are so pleased, they stated on one of their websites, these bonds help promote the country and pay for our costs and our society and our blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, then why did we cut the bonds? And if it's because the government said they're too expensive to maintain and manage, like the overhead of selling Canadian bonds is too high, then why are we promoting Israeli bonds?
Well, the thing is, it kind of looks like, we're going to stop selling Canadian bonds, and then people, if they still want to invest, they can always invest in the Israeli bonds because they're tax-free.
Oh, my God, that sucks, the big one. That's just terrible.
There's no other way around seeing this. Why would we stop selling Canadian bonds and still go ahead and sell Israeli bonds in Canada, for God's sake?
I know, and they're tax-free. So that's a problem. So, okay, we've got to wind her down. I don't want to push it right to the top of the hour. We've got, I believe, another show in, possibly, right after me. So, I would like you to briefly speak about CHLY, if you can, and then I'll play his tune as we go out.
Okay, CHLY, again, for some of the listeners that haven't heard this, CHLY is a young man that wrote a song for me in 2002. And within 4 days' time, the lyrics, everything from his bedroom. And I needed a song that reflected, that we need the people to actually start participating, start being the heroes they're supposed to be, because we are the foot soldiers here. And if we don't do our jobs, everything's going to go to hell, which we can see now has gone to hell pretty much. But we still have a chance to change things. And if people want to stop everything that's going around in Canada, the only way we're going to do it is through a pure direct democracy system, which is the Citizens Convention of Consent that people can find on myfreedom2017.com and then iaccuse.com. And then we've got Direct Democracy School as well. But CHLY is my pride and joy, because this young man didn't sell his soul to make it into the music industry, but he's so multifaceted and talented that it's well worth that people go and see, CHLYHeitner.com to see all about his many songs that he has there, and, to promote, this young talent. He's not so young anymore, but I still see him as almost like my second son.
Nice. Very good. All right. Well, I thank you very much again, Nicole, and we'll have you on the show very soon again.
Okay, wonderful. In the meantime, try not to make me upset when you're reading something online.
Oh, but it would be such a dull show if I didn't do something to twist a nose here and there.
If I hadn't been invited to the show, I would have called CHLY and just complained like you wouldn't believe.
Well, we'd have to get the manager to take that call. I'm kind of immune to some of that stuff, but yeah, I understand. But
it would be fun if people could call into your show.
I've been thinking about that. I should think some more, actually. And perhaps after the election, we'll set up one show a week that will be call-in.
Okay.
All righty. Have yourself...
Good. Well,
Go ahead.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So here we go. CHLY's Heroes.
together, do the work to make it better. Cause sometimes being free can cut just like a knife. If you're with me on this, I know we just can't win. You know that we can be the hero in our lives. Since we're free, the choice is up to you. The people gather round, we got a job to do. We got to be here, stand up for one another. It ain't no thing to help your sister or your brother. We don't need to wait and pray for a savior, when each and every one of us can feel the blues. And if you need to be let off on good behavior, the one you're looking for is walking in your shoes, yeah. Ain't no bird, ain't no plane, ain't no man in a cage, ain't no person doing feats to make a crowd big. No transport accessories, no belt with utilities. I'm not talking fantasy, I mean the real thing. We got to get together, do the work to make it better. Cause sometimes being free can cut just like a knife. If you're with me on this, I know we just can't miss. You know that we can be the hero in our lives. We got to get together, do the work to make it better. Cause sometimes being free can cut just like a knife. If you're with me on this, I know we just can't miss. You know that we can be the hero in our lives. Everybody's got their problems, but everything gon' be alright, yeah. Sometimes we get stuck in our own thing. Just call me up, I'll be there, I'll be your hero in the night. Ain't no bird, ain't no plane, ain't no man in a cage, ain't no person doing feats to make a crowd, yeah. No transport accessories, no belt with utilities. I'm not talking fantasy, I mean the real thing. We got to get together, do the work to make it better. Cause sometimes being free can cut just like a knife. If you're with me on this, I know we just can't miss. You know that we can be the hero in our lives. We got to get together, do the work to make it better. Cause sometimes being free can cut just like a knife. If you're with me on this, I know we just can't miss. You know that we can be the hero in our lives.
Heroes, always there. Heroes,
Hero in our lives.
heroes in our life. Heroes are for the fight.
Got to get together, do the work to make it better. Cause sometimes being free can cut just like a knife. If you're with me on this, I know we just can't miss. You know that we can be the hero in our lives. Got to get together, do the work to make it better. Cause sometimes being free can cut just like a knife. If you're with me on this, I know we just can't miss. You know that we can be the hero in our lives.
Well, people, that brings us to the end of Altered Egos for this episode. My name's Bob Hansen. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be here again next weekend. Presently listening to Mungo's Hi-Fi called Barnstormer. Coming up next is The Masthead, and all CHLY programs are available to be heard at www.chly.ca. Have yourselves a great week. Be careful. Be happy. Remember, resistance is creativity, and creativity is resistance.